She came with poison pap, ready to kill her own grandson. But when the baby cried, the earth answered. A spirit rose, and Mama Aduke's fate was sealed in fire and madness. Now they say her ghost still roams under the new moon. Want more chilling tales like this? Hit subscribe and step into the shadows of Forbidden Folktale. The sun had just begun to set behind the tall raffia palms that lined the edge of Orita village when Oba returned. Not alone, but with a woman no one recognized. Her name was Ife, tall, graceful, with the soft skin of the city and eyes that held quiet storms. Her wrapper was tied with the elegance of a true Benin woman, and her voice was calm, respectful, yet firm. Oba, son of Mama Aduke and the pride of Orita, had always been the village's golden son. He was the first to attend university, the first to travel far beyond the village's red sands, and the first to disappoint his mother so deeply. For back in Orita, plans had already been made. Mama Aduke, his aging but fiery mother, had long prepared a wife for him, a union that would bring wealth, respect, and power. The girl was Morunkeji, daughter of Chief Fasogbon, the cocoa merchant whose barns always overflowed. Morunkeji had been parading the village in colorful lace and jele, boasting to everyone who cared to listen that she was already Iyawo Oba, Oba's wife-to-be. The wedding date had not yet been set, but Mama Aduke had already given her the family comb, a symbol that she had been accepted as a bride. So, when word spread that Oba had returned from the city with another woman and married her in secret, the village buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Mama Aduke did not wait for the sun to fully rest before storming her son's compound, a wrapper hastily tied around her waist and her cane beating the ground in fury. "Oba, so this is how you repay me. After everything I've done for you, after all the sacrifices I made to send you to school, you brought home a city witch instead of Morunkeji." Oba stood silently, his tall frame hunched like a boy caught stealing yams. His wife, Ife, stood behind him, her hands respectfully folded, her eyes cast low, but her posture steady. "I love her, Mama," Oba finally said, his voice a whisper in the growing dusk. Mama Aduke spat into the dust. "Love," she hissed. "Is that what they call jazz these days?" 2 moons passed. Ife had begun to show signs of pregnancy. The village midwife, Mama Agba, confirmed it one morning after checking her pulse and watching the way she walked. "A boy," Mama Agba declared. "A strong one. His soul is older than yours." But joy was not welcome in that house. Not with Mama Aduke around. She had moved in just days after hearing of Ife's pregnancy, claiming that a woman as weak and foreign as Ife could not raise an Orita child properly. From the very first day, she brought with her a darkness, quiet, sharp, and constant. She refused to eat any meal Ife cooked. "Too much pepper," she'd say. "That's how these Benin girls poison people slowly." She forbade Ife from fetching water from the family well, claiming her city spirit would pollute the ancestral source. When Ife washed her baby wrappers and hung them on the line, Mama Aduke would yank them down, muttering that the witch child did not deserve fine cloth. At first, Ife thought perhaps she could win the old woman over with kindness. She rose early, cooked soft yam for her, cleaned the compound, and even massaged her swollen legs at dusk. But Mama Aduke was like a thorn bush, fed by spite and watered by tradition. "She's lazy," she told the neighbors. "Can't even kneel to greet properly." "She used jazz on my son," she whispered to the women at the market. "That's why he looks thinner now. She's draining his soul." "She eats strange leaves at night," she lied to Maroon Keji's mother. "Maybe she's not even pregnant. Maybe she stole the pregnancy in a shrine." The village listened. They always listened to Mama Aduke. Ify endured it all in silence, not because she was weak, but because she understood something Mama Aduke didn't. She was not alone. Oba, her husband, knew everything. He heard the insults. He saw the sabotage. He even noticed when the salt mysteriously disappeared from Ify's cooking, replaced with bitter herbs that left her mouth dry and nauseous. But he said nothing. He feared confronting his mother. She had once cursed his father in a fight, and he died the following year. He believed she was too deeply rooted in the spiritual traditions of her people to cross. "Just endure, my love," he'd whispered to Efe in the quiet of the night. "She will come around." But each day that Oba remained silent, something inside Efe shattered. Her heart began to harden. Not toward her husband, no, but toward his silence. As Efe's belly grew round like a full moon, Mama Aduke's attacks grew darker. She began placing bitter kola peels under Efe's mat. She consulted a roadside herbalist who gave her a dried powder. She sprinkled it in Efe's bathwater, hoping it would disturb the spirit of the unborn child. One evening while Efe was asleep, she poured palm oil mixed with grounded bitter leaves into her pot of ogbono soup. The goal was simple: cause miscarriage without suspicion. But when Efe took the first spoon, she gagged. Her body reacted, violently rejecting the food. She vomited for hours. Mama Agba was called again. The old midwife took one look at the contents of the soup, and her eyes narrowed. "Who cooked this?" she asked. "Efe did," Mama Aduke said, arms folded. But Mama Agba knew the look of poison when she saw one. She took Efe's palm and whispered a prayer to the ancestors, then reached into her own bag and produced a small pouch tied with red thread. Inside were 3 cowries and a piece of charcoal. "Your mother's spirit is watching you," she whispered to Efe. "This child is protected." And so he was. Efe's grandmother, Madame Ivy of Benin, was a powerful woman in life and even more powerful in death. Before Efe left the city, she tied a piece of her own hair with white thread and placed it into Efe's necklace, instructing her to always wear it beneath her wrapper. That charm now pulsed with warmth, guarding mother and child with invisible walls. The villagers began to notice that no matter what Mama Aduke did, Efe never crumbled. She grew thinner, yes, and her eyes bore the burden of sorrow, but her spirit remained strong, her back remained straight. She never shouted. She never cursed. She never raised a hand, even when Mama Aduke slapped her one morning for singing too loudly while pounding yam. "She is not ordinary," the villagers began to say. "Maybe it is jazz," some whispered. But the wise ones, the really old ones, said something different. "She has spiritual backing. That girl's chi is older than Aduke's bitterness." And so the seed was planted. Not just the seed in Efe's womb, but the seed of Mama Aduke's fall. The skies roared that night, louder than they had in years. Thunder cracked like a whip over the village of Orita, and rain beat the thatched roofs as though the heavens themselves were in labor. Inside Oba's compound, the air was thick with tension, incense, and blood. Efe's screams echoed through the mud walls, raw and primal, as the midwife Mama Agba pressed down on her belly with oiled hands. Outside the birth hut, Oba paced back and forth, worry painting deep lines into his face. And somewhere near the back of the house, Mama Aduke sat in the shrine room. her eyes cold and unforgiving, her cane beside her knees. She had not blessed this child. She had not welcomed this wife. To her, the night was not sacred. It was an abomination. The baby came just after midnight. The thunder fell silent in that moment, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He was a boy, strong, loud, full of life. His skin glistened like polished mahogany, and across his left shoulder was a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon, dark against his skin like charcoal. Mama Agba's eyes widened as she rubbed salt along the baby's limbs. "This one is marked," she whispered. "He carries the sign of the ancestors." Efe, soaked in sweat and tears, smiled faintly as she held her son to her chest. Her voice was weak, but the love in it was strong. "I will name him Tamuno, Child of God." Oba looked at the child, then at Efe, and nodded slowly. His silence once again spoke volumes. He said nothing of the crescent mark, nor of the old prophecy that once told of a child who would bring down the pride of a matriarch. But Mama Aduke had heard it. From the shrine she had heard the baby's cry pierce through the storm like a sword, and she had felt something ancient shift in the air. The following morning Mama Aduke did not come to bless the child as tradition required. Instead, she locked herself in the shrine room, stripped bare, and smeared her body with charcoal and red palm oil. She called upon the gods of her lineage, the ones her mother had served and her grandmother had feared. "Reject this child," she cried. "He is not of our blood. He is of the city, of strangers, of witchcraft." But no god answered. No wind shifted, no candle flickered. No chicken laid eggs in blood. The silence from the spirits was louder than thunder. Still, she refused to accept defeat. If the gods would not act, she would. In the days that followed, Efe was denied the rest most new mothers are granted. Mama Aduke turned the home into a military camp. By dawn, Efe was forced to sweep the compound, boil water for her own bath, and still find time to breastfeed Tamuno in between. When Oba left for the farm, Mama Aduke made her grind pepper with bare hands, fetch water from the stream, and wash her own bloody clothes under the midday sun. She hid baby wrappers, poured out Efe's pap when she wasn't looking, spilled her bath water, told neighbors Efe was too lazy to keep the house clean. Then came the accusations. "That boy doesn't look like Oba," she began to say in whispers around the village square. "He has city eyes. Maybe she was already pregnant when she came. She doesn't kneel before her husband. She must be using charm. She eats alone in the afternoon. What kind of woman hides food from her family?" The village began to murmur. They always did. Oba heard the talk. He saw the tension in his wife's shoulders and the fading glow in her eyes, but still he said nothing. He had become a man made of shame and silence, two ingredients that slowly poison love. One hot afternoon, Efe sat beneath the old mango tree behind the house, her baby sleeping in her arms, her wrapper stained with sweat and breast milk. Her tears rolled silently, tracing lines down her cheeks. There was no strength left to cry aloud. She whispered prayers to her grandmother's spirit, asking for strength, for escape, for even death if peace would not come. That was when she appeared. Out of the heat haze, from the footpath that led toward the forest, an old woman emerged, her frame crooked, her feet bare, her hair tangled into long dreadlocks tied with cowries. She wore a wrap of leaves and bark, and her skin looked like tree bark itself, cracked and ancient. She said nothing at first. She simply stood there, staring. Then she spoke, her voice like wind rustling through dry palm fronds. "The pain you carry is not yours alone. The gods see, the land listens." Efe looked up, startled but too weary to move. The old woman came forward and sat beside her without asking. "I am Ayausa," the woman said, her eyes glowing faintly. "I walk between this world and the next. I have heard your child's cry." Efe clutched Tamuno tighter. "Don't be afraid," Ayausa whispered, running a long finger over the baby's birthmark. "He is not ordinary. He bears the mark of justice." She reached into her side pouch and brought out a small cowrie necklace, its string made of dried snakeskin and red thread. "Place this around his neck," she instructed. "It will guard him when the moon hides." Efe's lips trembled. Why are you helping me?" Ayausa smiled, a crooked thing that barely touched her eyes. "Because the blood of queens runs in your veins, because your grandmother once gave me kola nut in a time of famine, because your pain will birth justice. But you must not leave this house on the night of the third new moon, no matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name. Stay within." She rose as suddenly as she'd come, and before Eve could blink again, she was gone. The mango leaves rustled once more, and then silence. Eve did as instructed. She placed the cowrie necklace around Tamuno's neck, tucking it beneath his wrapper where no one could see, and slowly, despite the storm of hatred in her home, she began to draw strength again. She smiled more at her son. She sang lullabies from her childhood. She remembered who she was, not a weak city girl, but a lioness from a long line of women who fought battles without raising fists. But Mama Aduke was watching. She noticed the shift. She saw the light returning to Ife's eyes, the way Tamuno no longer cried at night, the way the house now carried a peace she did not create, and that frightened her. For in her heart she began to understand something dark and dangerous. She could not break them, not by rumor, not by burden, not even by pain. So she decided it was time to act, one final time. The village carried on. Oba, though still weak, began to look at his wife with new eyes. Sometimes he even helped with Tamuno, holding him awkwardly as though ashamed of his absence during the early days. But Mama Aduke smiled less. She barely spoke now. She spent long hours inside the family shrine, burning incense and muttering old words. She was planning something ancient, something final. Ife could feel it, in her bones, in her dreams, in the way the shadows move strangely after dusk. But she remembered Ayausa's words, "Your pain will bring justice." She waited. She watched the moon wax and wane, and when it reached its darkest phase, the third new moon, when no light kissed the earth, Ife made sure to lock her door. She would not be caught outside. The sky was silent. Not a star blinked. Not a cricket dared to sing. It was the night of the third new moon, a night when the heavens turned their face from the earth, when even spirits walked with shadows longer than their bodies. Inside Oba's compound, all seemed still. The lantern had been put out. The wooden door creaked only slightly in the wind. Tamuno, now 3 months old, slept curled against his mother's breast, his tiny fingers clutching the edge of her wrapper. Efe did not sleep. She pretended to. Her heart was pounding like a drum at a village festival. Ayeusa's warning echoed in her mind. No matter what you hear, do not leave the house. But what if the danger came inside? She pulled the wrapper tighter around Tamuno's small body and shut her eyes. But her ears, her soul, her ancestors were alert. And then it happened. The door creaked. Not the wind this time. Something, or someone, was inside. Efe remained still. The soft, calculated steps drew nearer. She knew those steps. She had memorized them over months of torment. The dragging of one foot slightly behind the other. The faint tap of wood on mud floor. Mama Aduke. In one hand she carried a calabash bowl of pop laced with powdered oleander root, a deadly poison known to still the heart in minutes. In the other, she clutched a soft pillow, sewn years ago by her own mother, now to be used for murder. Her eyes were wild with resolve, her lips tight with prayer, an incantation whispered in the dialect of her ancestors. She moved like a woman possessed, not with a demon, but with hate, envy, and shame. The kind that festers so long it mutates into something darker than any spirit. She stood over the bed, watched them sleep, or seem to sleep. She dipped her fingers into the pap, rubbed a bit across Efe's lips, and then reached for the pillow. But the moment it hovered over Efe's face, Tamuno let out a cry. But not an ordinary cry. It was a long, piercing wail, louder than thunder, sharper than metal against stone. The walls of the room shivered. The lantern flickered back to life on its own, bathing the space in ghostly yellow light. And from the darkest corner of the room stepped Ieusa. But she was no longer just an old woman. Her hair flowed like smoke. Her skin glowed with the shimmer of ancient bark. Her eyes burned green like twin flames of judgment. She raised her arm, and the pillow in Mama Aduke's hand burst into ash. The pap bowl flew across the room and shattered against the wall. Mama Aduke stumbled backward. Her voice tried to rise in a scream, but no sound came. Ieusa took another step forward, her feet leaving no mark on the ground, yet shaking the entire house. From her mouth came not her own voice, but the voice of Efe's grandmother, long dead, buried in the red soil of Benin. You plant pain and expect joy. You feed hate and expect honor. You cursed love and expected loyalty. You betrayed motherhood and claimed righteousness. The voice was calm but powerful. It struck Mama Aduke like a whip. Her legs buckled. Her cane, resting against the wall, burst into flames. The fire climbed, danced, and flickered like it had found its master. Mama Aduke screamed. This time her voice returned, but it was a scream like no other. A wail of realization, of guilt, of knowing finally that the spirits had turned their backs on her. She stumbled blindly from the room, clawing at her head tie, now falling loose around her shoulders. The house roared with wind, though no windows were open. The walls groaned. and the ancestral masks hanging in the shrine room, the wooden faces carved generations ago, began to shake. She staggered into the room. The masks fell, one by one. Oba's father's mask, his grandfather's, his great-uncle's, all fell at her feet. And then, silence. By dawn, the villagers gathered outside the compound. They had heard the child's cry, louder than thunder, louder than war drums. They had seen lights they could not explain. They had heard something inhuman speak in the dead of night. And now they found Mama Aduke, under the sacred Iroko tree, planted generations ago to watch over the family compound. She sat, wide-eyed, mute. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Her head swayed from side to side, but no sense remained in it. She clutched at air, whispered to ants, chased butterflies like a child lost in a forgotten time. She was never the same again. Some said she had gone mad. Others said the ancestors had taken her voice. The oldest villagers knew better. They said, she looked into the mirror of her own wickedness, and what she saw broke her. Oba sat beside the fire pit that morning, his head bowed low. He had not seen what happened, but he had heard his mother's scream. He had seen the trail of ash and shattered calabash, and he had held his son Tamuno in his arms, while Efe sat beside them, silent and tearful, but glowing with power, not charm, but divine protection. Oba wept, and for the first time in years he knelt before Efe. "Forgive me," he said, his voice cracking like dry bamboo. "Forgive me for my silence, for standing behind a woman who brought you nothing but pain." Efe said nothing for a long while. Then she reached out and placed her hand on his. The warmth of it melted something in him. "I do not forgive for you," she said softly. "I forgive for Tamuno, so he will never learn hate." Tamuno grew strong, quick to walk, quicker to speak. The crescent moon on his shoulder deepened in color as he grew, and with it, his wisdom. By the age of 10, he could recite chants known only to elder priests. By 15, he began interpreting dreams for the villagers, accurately. By 20, he became one of the youngest spiritual leaders in the region, a priest of protection, known far and wide for defending the weak and healing homes torn by hate. When women came to him, weeping of wicked in-laws, he listened without judgment. When men asked for guidance, he reminded them what strength truly meant, standing for what is right, not what is comfortable. People came from as far as Osogbo, Calabar, and Lokoja to seek his counsel. And behind every word he spoke, there echoed a truth born from his own story. Mama Aduke lived many more years, mute, wandering the village barefoot. Some said she could still hear voices, voices only she could understand. She was never violent, never loud again, just there, a shadow of a woman who once burned with pride. Children avoided her, elders pitied her. But when a new wife was being maltreated by a mother-in-law, villagers would tell a cautionary tale. "Do you want to end up like Mama Aduke?" And in the dark corners of gossip, they added a chilling phrase. "Don't let the spirit of Mama Aduke find you under the new moon." And so, in the village of Orita, peace slowly returned. Efe became a pillar in the community, respected, loved, and revered. Oba never again kept silent in the face of injustice, and Tamuno child of the storm, born on the night of thunder, remained a symbol of balance, a reminder that no matter how deeply rooted wickedness is, the earth always finds a way to spit it out. Because in this world and the next, pain may linger, but justice never forgets.